Good afternoon, everyone. I am Kim Shell from the BisNow team, and welcome to today's webinar, Commercial Real Estate Town Hall with the legendary and amazing Larry Hurd. We'd like to say a special thank you to our audience, as well as everyone for being so positive and excited to participate during a pretty uneasy time. From all of us at BisNow, I want to say we're determined to push the commercial real estate industry forward, help you do more business, and bring you cutting edge news and opportunities to learn and connect during this time as well. Before I introduce our speakers, some housekeeping tips that will help. To all our attendees, everyone is on mute and without video, so there's no judging here. If you're homeschooling, if you're only dressed casually, we don't know, and we're just glad that you are able to join us. As this is a video platform and a lot of us are dialed in from home, you may experience a slight delay. If you experience any technical difficulties, please log out and log back in again. That usually fixes everything. Also, at the bottom of your screen, you'll notice that there is a chat and a Q&A area. If you have any questions for our speakers, please enter them into the Q&A. But the chat section is really fun. Please introduce yourself, say hi, say hello to new friends and old colleagues, and enjoy the interactive portion of this. With enough of that, I am so thrilled to introduce two of our speakers, Larry Hurd, CEO of Transwestern, Chip Clark, President of the West Region of Transwestern. If you have not heard these two speak before, you're in for a treat. And if you have, then I know why you're back, because they are going to give us a great 50 minutes or so of informative and fun conversation. And with that, I will bring this over to you, Chip.
Perfect. Hey, thank you, Kim. And first, want to thank Will and Katie and Sophie and all of our friends at BisNow. This was a great opportunity for me to put on a collared shirt, and I wanted to see if my blazer would still fit, and so far so good. Larry, you look great, and I know you're doing well, and I know the family's doing well. So I don't want to. Absolutely. It all. Absolutely. I thought we'd get right into it. I don't want to age you, but I know you've been through several downturns in your real estate career, and that's really part of the business. But I thought it would be interesting for you to kind of talk about this downturn and how is it different, and then what have you communicated and how are you communicating? I thought people would want to know how you're communicating to our Transwestern team.
Well, and I don't want to go off script right away, Chip, as is usually our style.
2 minutes in, right? Yeah.
Those are good questions. Those are good questions. But I would like, just as an intro to our audience, first of all, just to say, hey, hope everybody that's tuning in is well, and hope you're doing okay during very unsettling times. I think Chip and I want to make this very informative. And hopefully you have some take-home value, but also if you glean a word of encouragement along the way, that's sort of part of the program as well. I would say that what's different about this downturn, frankly, this crisis, I think of it both what's similar and what's different. So similar, the timing was a surprise. In all of the downturns, the timing has been a surprise. And I would say the catalyst of the downturn, what brought it on, was also a surprise. And that's another component of all of the downturns that we've been through. So similar in that no one was able to predict the timing and no one was able to predict the catalyst, although people have been calling for that for a long time. But I would say what's different, I haven't been through anything that has been this comprehensive, a true global pandemic that affected not only all of our businesses in the commercial real estate field, but really businesses across the country and every household across the country and really across the globe. And so nothing that's been this comprehensive so far. And so to your second question about what message that I and our leadership team, you included, Chip, have wanted to pass on to the Transwestern team, similar to most companies out there, we wanted to, a couple of things, really 3 things. Number one, always tell the truth. What's really going on? And our employees, our team members across the country, they need to know what actually is happening and how severe this is. They don't need a sort of sugar-coated response. That way you can bring all of your team members into the solution as you're thinking about next steps. And, you know, I learned that early in my career in the mid 80s, my first downturn. Robert Duncan, our chairman, the downturn in the mid 80s to a Texas-based real estate company was brutal. I mean, it was kind of the center of the universe, sort of like New York was in the 08-09 downturn. And I always appreciated the candor and openness and transparency around that. And I've really tried to adopt that in everything I've done relative to talking to our team members, talking to our clients, friends, and really just here's what's really going on. So that was number one. And then I had two other thoughts I really wanted to impart to our employees. Is number one, not many of us were accustomed to working remotely. So when we had the shelter in place orders across the country, some were, but most of the people like me, I've been going to work every day for 40 years, right? And not many of us were accustomed to that. So I was trying to encourage people, myself included, from my own personal experience, to try. Most of us are accustomed to being in a routine when we went to work. Try to find a rhythm or a routine at home that you could get on, and that, you know, if you like to exercise in the morning or you like to exercise after work, try to maintain that, and do the kinds of things. Get up at the same time. Don't, just because you're off sitting at home, don't use that as an opportunity to, you know, alter that too dramatically. So develop a rhythm. And the only thing I would alter with that now, if you've done that for like 30 days, you may be tired of that rhythm, of that going to that same little place. So maybe you change that up. But I think developing a rhythm and getting into a routine in order to be productive at home, because everyone really wants to be productive. We need to be productive working remotely. And then the other thing, this was something that happened early on, Chip, and we talked about this. The media was particularly focused on talking about COVID-19 as how it was so novel and there's no playbook for how to deal with this.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I bought that because no one could see COVID-19 coming. There is no playbook for COVID-19. There's no vaccine for it. The smartest people in the world are trying to develop that. But I did not buy the argument that there's no playbook that all of us across the country should be following. In fact, we all have a playbook, and our playbook is really our value systems and our belief systems and the things that our parents and grandparents and mentors taught us. In a crisis, we sort of know what to do. And, you know, you try and keep your head, you try and act with integrity, you communicate honestly. So one thing, a lot of people around the country, you know, they're afraid, right? Because it was such an unknown. And I thought it was important to center in on everyone's belief systems, to offer an anchor, or to be, to be confident. You do have a playbook. You know exactly what to do in a crisis. It ain't gonna be easy, but you know what to do. And so I thought those were some important themes to underscore early on.
So yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. It's great advice. So what would you say in addition to all that? What kind of advice would you give to the young people? You know, we've got a very active Transwestern Young Professionals organization, and
yeah.
And what would you say to folks that are really going through their first downturn?
Well, it's a tough one to be the first.
Yeah, number one, right?
It's a tough one. I would say first and foremost that downturns are part of the business. Mm-hmm. So I've been involved in 4 major downturns and then maybe 2 or 3 what they call minor downturns, and none of those minor downturns felt like they were minor when you were going through it. So from 1980 to 2020 now, for 40 years, 7 downturns that I've been involved in and kind of, you know, persevered and lived through or whatever. I would say if you're young, just underwrite the fact that in the business that we're in, it's going to be cyclical. And most of the great businesses, whether it's oil and gas, commercial real estate, investment banking, those businesses that have the most upside, they also have the most volatility. It's just part of the program for those industries, including ours. So I would just encourage people, be resilient. Don't flee the business right now because it's tough if you really feel well suited for it. Just recognize that every 5 or 10 years, you're going to go through something like this. So as you're having a great year and making a bunch of money, don't spend every dime you make. Save it for a rainy day, because we'll have a rainy day or two. But just to really expect that this is part of the business. And similarly, there's going to be great years and great times. And, you know, we've been on a, 11-year recovery from between 08, 09 and what happened to us a few months ago. So I would just say that underwrite it as part of the business, expect it, and have your game face on when the time gets here. The other thing I would say for young professionals is don't focus on yourself. Obviously, you're going to focus on yourself right away, get your sea legs under you, get established. But I would say turn your attention to your clients early on. And this is an opportunity to really distinguish yourself and your company to your clients and your customers during a real tough time. Go kind of all in behind them.
Yeah, no, I think that was great advice that I think we all talked about kind of early on was don't use this as a time to disengage, but really kind of double up your efforts to engage with each other and engage with your clients.
Yeah.
So that's terrific. What would you're president and CEO of what we call the Transwestern family of companies, which includes an investment and a development and a venture component. What do you see with this with the period of time that we're in? Those projects that were under development, what do you see happening on that investment and development side of the business? What's going to happen there?
Well, I think it's a good question, and I'll preface it by saying we're in about the 3rd or 4th inning of a 9-inning ball game. So my crystal ball is no more clear than anybody watching today. There's really no who knows, right? Mm-hmm. I would say experience tells you that there are a couple of outcomes that can happen, and then what we've seen recently is pretty instructive. Most of the deals that are pretty far along, let's just say take a development deal where your debt and equity are lined up, your co-investments lined up, you've got a permit. Those deals are all starting. It's been pretty remarkable and impressive that the lending community, the banks, if they've underwritten a deal and they've made a commitment to a developer, they're following through with that in large part in general. And those deals are taking place. So we've had a couple of deals in March and one already in April that we're commencing around the country. So I would say if everything was at the 10-yard line and about ready to score, people that underwrote those properly, those deals have happened. And I would say that we've seen the same thing on the acquisition front and the same thing on major leases and occupier solutions deals. Those deals that were well down the road have all happened. So most people had a pretty good March and a pretty good first 2 weeks of April. We have begun to see some labor shortages, labor issues, maybe some supply chain issues, permitting issues in certain cities from a development standpoint. In general, across the country, construction is viewed as essential. There are a state or two or a city or two that have shut down commercial construction. They're allowing hospitals or healthcare and what they consider essential types of industries to continue. But other than that, those examples, I would say that generally things are going to move slower. But if they were well down the road, they're happening. Then I would say if you're not very far down the road and you began to circle projects, but you didn't have the debt and the equity lined up, those deals are either going to get canceled or delayed or pushed out for some period of time. No idea how long. In other words, when do we resume work in the workplace, and when does all that occur? We'll see. Right. But those deals are going to be pushed out. So I think it's sort of a little bit of the haves and the have-nots. But as long as construction goes on state to state and city to city, those deals will be delivered, and we see those generally taking place.
So if there was a safe harbor, what would you say that is? Is there a safe harbor? I guess number one, in product type that is going to be more resilient, and if so, what is that? And who are the winners and who are the losers?
Well, that's to be seen, right? Too early to call a winner and a loser. I will say one thing we've learned from past downturns is the asset classes that were performing the best going into the downturn typically come out fastest. And so if you look at how well the industrial logistics component was doing, I would put multifamily into that arena. I would put healthcare into that arena. I would say safer harbor assets would be more in the industrial logistics, multifamily, and healthcare arenas. The office arena would lag those probably because there were some things going on in the office business anyway. Not to say, it'll be interesting to see, kind of how office responds to this, but I think that office is going to respond just fine to this downturn. Not everybody agrees with me on that, but I can talk about that in a minute. Retail's interesting because, retail, the consumer was actually rocking and rolling. Consumer confidence was high. Retailers were doing well. Brick and mortar retail was transitioning to the logistics industrial side of the business. So a lot of the brick and mortar was struggling. And I would say that the retail will have some struggles and issues. And obviously hospitality will probably be the toughest coming out of it because it's sort of tip of the spear experiencing some really tough times right now. But well thought of, well located real estate will continue to perform, but I sort of like the asset classes that were doing the best going in to this crisis.
Yeah, and you can make industrial business was doing great. And you can make an argument that it could be supercharged in some respects, given what Amazon and some of the other logistics shipping companies. And
yes,
what about the overall real estate environment, commercial real estate as an industry? How do you see that emerging from this pandemic?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I think a lot of people are asking that. I think commercial real estate is going to emerge in great shape. I really do. I don't know when. We're going to have some issues really to deal with as relates to tenants, retail tenants, and office tenants and industrial tenants. Perhaps not being able to pay rent for a while, so that'll be a problem for the industry. But if you just think about what was going on again before the downturn, when I got into the business, most of the big institutional investors had a 2 to 4% allocation to real estate, and almost all of them have 10% today, 10% allocations to real estate. So the real estate, commercial real estate, was viewed as sort of a fair-haired child, if you will, in the investment sector. Very strong current returns. There was a capital asset that you could acquire. Debt was very cheap, which made the performance of those assets usually outperform. And so returns in our sector have been great. I don't view that changing as we come out of it, certainly not midterm or long term. So I feel very good about commercial real estate as an industry. I don't think we're going through quite the transitions other industries like energy and others are having to deal with. And I think we'll be viewed as a very favorable sector from an investment standpoint coming out of it.
Wow. So coming out of it, I mean, that's a great segue. When do we come out of it, and what does it look like when we come out of it? I know, that's a question that I think has popped up a couple of times already. What does it look like when we all go back to work?
Yeah. When we come out, no idea, of course.
Yeah.
Wouldn't hazard a guess there.
Might be breaking news, Larry. We might.
Yeah,
exactly.
There'll be breaking news, but it isn't coming from me on a forecast on when we're going to emerge from this. I just think that I think when we emerge from it, it would be naive to think that nothing was going to change, right? In other words, there are going to be significant changes, my guess is. I think some things will go right back to normal. normal from the standpoint of what we've been accustomed to, but I think we're going to look at some pretty dramatic changes in the way that we office and the way that we interact with each other. But that said, I'm pretty hopeful. Back to my earlier comment about office buildings. People could say, well, yeah, but you know, everyone has gone and worked remotely, and look how well that's gone. Technology allows that. People are working productively from home, et cetera. And I would say it has been remarkable how quickly people have adapted to a home workplace environment, and we've proven that we can do it. But who wants to do it? In other words, do you want to do this for another 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year?
Yeah.
Right. In other words, we sort of all thrive on interaction and dealing with each other. And I think that said, I think we will be working remotely more frequently than we have in the past. But I just think the ability to interact at the end of the day is going to trump the idea if we all just stay in our kitchens and our living rooms or wherever we're working and we just do this and we don't have any more gatherings. And I'm not buying it. I just think that we as individuals and as people thrive on that personal interaction. So my sense is we end up getting right back into the flow, but we treat each other differently. It's going to be this has been so traumatic. Probably it's pretty emotional for a lot of people. I think it would be naive to think there's going to be nothing different. I think we'll have a lot of different components that emerge, but I think we'll end up, I think the office buildings are going to continue to be leased.
What do you think? Do you think from a macro standpoint, do you think that it means something different for, you know, again, before the downturn, everything was about, you know, urban mixed use developments. The suburbs had kind of lagged in certain cities around the country. Do you think this may lead to a reemergence of the suburbs?
Well, I think it's a good question. I would say that the trend toward urban was driven by the consumer, right? It was driven by the millennial cohort, which is now the largest component of the workforce. And so that group, how they respond to this, if they want to make a lifestyle change that would drive to a more significant suburban result, that'll happen. And if they sort of re-up and stay with their, you know, more social distancing, but they still enjoy the urban components, my guess is that'll stay too. My sense is that when we come out of it, again, the things that were strongest, there was a reason that they were good, strong fundamentals. I think that'll stay in place, but I don't have a sense, Chip, that just because of this, you know, all of a sudden the urban loses all the momentum in favor of the suburban. I think it'll be a mixed bag, and I think different parts of the country will experience different results. I don't think a single brushstroke is going to define every geography and every component.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So we're sitting here in right down the street from each other. We're sitting here in Houston, Texas, where the energy industry continues to be such a huge driver to our local economy. And then you've got, you know, coronavirus. What does that mean for Houston, given the double whammy, if you will?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, we have a lot of people from around the country that are dialing in, I know, today. But for those of you that live in Houston or in Texas, I would say that everything you've been reading about the energy business, it's as tough as it reads. In other words, that industry, the energy industry, is really going through a transformation. It is very difficult, and you know, if you think about it, before coronavirus, before COVID-19. The reason that the energy business was stuck at that $50 a barrel or $55 a barrel pricing is that there was just a slight supply overhang, among other things. But there was a slight supply overhang, a little bit more supply than demand globally. And what's happened over the last 3 or 4 months, and what was so interesting about Russia and Saudi Arabia and the United States over the weekend coming to that pact to reduce production by 10%. So if roughly 100 million barrels a day are produced, if 10 million, I think was the number that the cutback, that 10% cutback in normal times would have made a massive difference. Mm-hmm. But when demand drops 35%, which is what's happened, the 10% cutback isn't gonna help a lot. It'll stabilize where we are today, and it'll probably drift up a little bit. But I think until demand kicks back in, and I don't know if that's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, or longer, 24 months, I would say it's going to be tough news for the energy business. Now, that said, the energy sector is not going away. The energy business isn't going away. You know that as well as anybody.
Right.
We're all accustomed. When we walk in our house, we flip on the light switch. We like the lights to come on. And if it's hot or cold, we like to hit the thermostat, and we like to get the temperature.
To keep our Topo Chicos cold.
There you go. That's a good ad there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, so what's going to happen is we have so much, once the demand gets back to whatever the new normal is on the demand, but people start traveling again and flying places and whatnot, I do think that we're going to see the energy business in a big transformation, but it's going to be dependent on fossil fuels for the next 5 years, 7 years, 10 years until that transformation toward more renewables takes place. I do think we'll see that over time. And if I had to speculate, I would say that the smartest people in that space with the most R&D going on, the most advanced technology tend to be the big energy companies, the ones that have benefited from fossil fuels. I think they're going to be part of the group leading into the transformation to renewables. All that comes back to Houston office space. So I would say if that group of major tenants all located in Houston stays in the driver's seat, so to speak, on energy in general, then I think over time, after we get through a short-term pain of maybe as long as 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I don't know, but I think it'll be a while. But if we get through that, I think that group is going to end up leading out, and I think Houston will continue to be a very prominent place from an energy component. But I would say it's going to be pretty tough. It's going to be very tough, and for that business, like you said, it's gotten the double whammy: demand way down, and the coronavirus. It's pretty rough.
Yep, right. Well, we're starting to get a lot of, I can see on the board, a bunch of really good questions, but so any final thoughts or any things that are on your heart before we go to some of the other questions from the audience?
Well, the only thing I would say to summary, again, speaking maybe to the younger group out there that are new professionals in the commercial real estate business is when things are great, don't really think that it's always going to be that way. But similarly, when it's tough, don't get discouraged. Be resilient. We're in a great industry. Commercial real estate's a great industry. Lots of capitals continue to be attracted to it. It's a great place to build a career, build relationships. Some of our best relationships, Chip, as you know so well, are with clients that we've had 15, 20, 30 years. Very rewarding business. And I would be more of an encourager for people to keep a good attitude. And again, you have a playbook on how to deal with adversity in a crisis, and just follow your own personal playbook and the things you believe in, and act with integrity. And I think it'll be fine.
I do love that. I do love, I do think that, we've talked about it before, that just the, fact that we're a private company, that we've got 2,300 team members, you've always kind of used that, sitting around the kitchen table and just be real transparent about what we're dealing with and how it's going. And I think we've been able to do that because of how our company is set up. So I appreciate that. All right. So I think I may just go to the questions here. Kim, is that all right? Just to kind of go through some of these?
Yeah, sure. We did have a couple on suburban healthcare, healthcare real estate, if that's one you'd like to.
Sure.
Well, I think healthcare. Hey, I spend significant amount of time in the space. I serve in a capacity on a major medical center, major teaching hospital. And what we have seen, of course, is a lot of the big hospital systems getting closer to the consumer. And I would say that healthcare real estate is going to be one of those real estate components, just like multifamily and just like logistics, that I would say coming out will be good. Right now, the healthcare industry is going through a crisis just like all of ours. Think about it. If you're a hospital in a hospital system, the idea that you're doing these tests and swabbing folks and whatnot, no hospital system's making any money doing that. All of the elective procedures are on hold, and those are the most lucrative components in the hospital's vernacular and world from a financial standpoint. So I personally like the long-term healthcare as an investment because I like the long-term demographics of our age group aging and doing so with all of the things to well-being and the components that we've underwritten for years and years and years. So I think it's going to be a strong investment, but I do think it's interesting. Not many people realize the kind of crisis hospitals are in. Not only are they, this is just like firemen and police and other downturns. I mean, these are first responders. I admire so much the healthcare professionals in this country and the commitment that they've made to deal with everybody who's ill, especially with as contagious as this virus is. They're real national heroes, but it's a tough time for hospital systems right now from an economic standpoint. The economic model doesn't work just handling this and not doing the other things. But I would say suburban, moving closer to the patient, suburban healthcare may emerge as something even more prominent than it did in advance of this. You may want to get closer to the action.
So, great answer. So we just got another question about consolidation in the real estate industry, and do you think, what does this do? Kind of the financial impact that real estate firms and everybody's feeling. What does that do to further consolidation in the industry?
Yeah, I think the consolidation trend's been underway for a long time. You're either sort of acquiring and growing, or you're, being folded into something else. And I would say that the exception to that are really small boutique firms in cities around the country that have been there for a long time, and they're narrow, but they're deep in a particular area. I would say the very, very best small companies, the very, very best mid-sized companies, and the very, very best very large companies are all going to do well. I almost look like if you're in the top 25% of performers in those areas, you're going to do fine. I do think, just like we've been acquiring smaller companies around the country, I think people are going to continue to grow through acquisitions. Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of the day, I think it all comes down to being a high performance company. I think the higher performing company that can provide the broadest service delivery from development to investment to comprehensive services are going to be the winners. And so I think that the clients are looking for more. They're looking for more depth. Mm-hmm. And it's incumbent upon companies like ours and many others to be broad in your ability to serve your clients in a number of different areas. Perfect.
We've got a question from Trey Montoya that talks about the downturn in the economy, specifically hitting lower income families and the workforce. Do you think that this will lead to more affordable housing in larger cities?
Trey, it's a good question. I don't think there's any doubt that the lower income folks around the country are impacted. Many of them are living paycheck to paycheck anyway. I think that's a question that'd be interested in what you think on that, Chip. But I'm not sure. I think that at the end of the day, the investor is going to look for a return that they believe is durable and has legs. So I would say, you know, you could make the argument that B and C apartments are going to be affected the most right now. In other words, that's the cohort that has the hardest time maybe paying rent short term, whereas A dwellers probably have more capacity to endure a downturn for several months. So at one level, I would say it's going to be the tougher part of the equation. But that said, yes, cities have definitely started moving, as you referenced earlier, Chip, the urbanization of America. Well, to the degree that drives out some of the affordable housing, I think cities aren't tolerating that as much. In other words, I think they're saying, fine, build your product here, but you have to have 10, 20, 30% affordable, or you need to figure out a way to deliver that component over to that area. In other words, they're not prepared just to let the gentrification happen across the board, where people are dislocated and pushed out across the country. I think that was happening for a while, and I think there's been a renaissance in that arena.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There's been a lot of questions, Larry, about rent relief requests, and do you have any thoughts on that, on how you see certain landlords handling it? Or
yeah, so it's early, real early, and obviously those that felt the pain the earliest are multifamily and retail. I mean, let's face it, if you're a retailer and your business is just shut down and you go from whatever sales down to virtually zero, many retailers in line are having a hard time paying their rent. And I would say that the duration of this downturn is going to end up defining what those rent deferrals look like. I would say if you're a really good tenant and you can demonstrate that your business is significantly impaired, but you've got a plan to get out of this thing, and you have some capacity with lenders and your bank, as you begin to chew into that, we're seeing some landlords are prepared to abate or defer, rather, maybe 3 months of rent, but try and recapture that fairly soon, not necessarily tack it all onto the end. Lots of different solutions, but I think that at the end of the day, the landlords want to keep their tenants. They want to keep their good tenants, and they're going to work with them to a point. But I don't think landlords want to become the bank for the tenant. In other words, I think the landlords are going to say, use your banking relationships first. We're not your bank, but we value your tenancy and we want to be a part of the solution. But at the end of the day, depending on how the lenders work, and then ultimately does the government come in almost in unprecedented fashion, how the government, never before has the government been so quick to infuse this many dollars into a crisis. And so that could be part of the solution as well. And so that the lenders could forbear and work with their developer owners, who then can turn around and work with their tenants. It's just a little too early to tell. And I would say if we come out of this quicker, if there's 3 scenarios, a V-shape or a V-shape with a lag, or a U-shape, depending on which scenario plays out, that'll dictate kind of the answer. But I think that landlords and tenants are going to have to really be working with each other and communicating through the whole process.
You know, Larry, there's been a bunch of questions and comments on your comment about kind of what does it look like when we go back to work, and
yeah,
and I think just from reading everything, it looks like everybody's kind of anxious to get back and be around people, but then some comments about that in any kind of disruptive period of time, makes you look at traditional business models and
yeah.
Hey, should we change things up? And I know for me personally, I want to get back around people, but now I am more comfortable working remotely. So there's going to be some kind of integration of how that works. Do you have any more thoughts on that for kind of you personally, or for Transwestern as a company?
Yeah, we do have a task force, as you know, Chip, you're involved nationally working on the reentry. It is going to be different. So let me just clarify if that wasn't clear the first time. I do think we're going to use office space going forward. And I do think the human interaction is critical and vital to us. And I do think it will be different. Absolutely. In other words, the sea of cubicles with people jammed into each other, I wouldn't go long on that concept right now. So I would say that we'll be doing things differently. I even heard, you've been talking with a bunch of people, maybe even mention what you told me the other day about, the laps around the office.
I think that's something that's, people are talking about, are you going to have, one-way laps around the office, and, are you going to be a clockwise office or a counterclockwise office? And so I do think, people are, I know we've got groups that are working with, kind of major architectural firms around the country that are looking at this issue from a workplace strategy standpoint, from a, what protocols should be in place for when people do kind of re-enter an office building. I know, there's been a lot of discussion, I think Jimmy Hinton in our office, as you know, who handles our analytics and research, made the comment that Houston has kind of benefited from the fact that we are spread out a little bit, and we don't have massive mass transit infrastructure. And talking to one of our clients the other day, he said, hey, do I want to be, 15 inches, 12 inches from somebody riding the subway every day or am I going to figure out a way to work more remotely or work in a different kind of environment? So I do think it's going to be, really interesting. And I think smart people are going to figure it out. And there'll be companies that are in existence, 5 years from now that kind of came out of this whole disruptive period of time.
Yes, I don't think there's any doubt that density is going to lighten up. I don't think people are going to be as comfortable being as dense, whether it's sitting in a restaurant with another table 6 inches from you, to the cubicle situation that I mentioned earlier, to some of the items you brought up. So we're gonna go through a different set of circumstances here, and it will change the way we office. But again, I just don't think people are going to, at the end of the day, you and I certainly won't, come into our living room, plug in, and work all day from this without any more interaction than this. I think we'll do more of it than we ever did before. But I don't think we'll exclusively do this.
A number of questions about handshaking. What's your personal view of that? Do you think that?
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? My dad and granddad have just, from the minute I was old enough to, give them a good grip and look them in the eye, right? In other words, that's, my gosh, that was
kind
just
of baked
a sign
into
you learn that as a young boy. It was hammered into our heads, and I don't know. I heard there was a bishop in New York who mentioned that was part of the greeting that they did at their church, and part of the greeting was a handshake, and that was just part of the way that people greeted each other. And he goes, I don't know if that turns into a slight bow or a nod or a wave for a while, or if there's some different short-term response to that. I think it will be different. I don't think we'll see as much firm handshaking early on, but I just don't know long term. I don't know, but I think it'll be, people aren't as comfortable with it now. I mean, let's face it. Caroline and I were somewhere recently, and all of a sudden someone sneezed, and I mean, everyone turned and looked at that person like, 6 months ago, if someone sneezed and they covered they covered properly, it wasn't, I didn't think a thing about it. So it'll be different, but I'm one of those, like a good firm handshake, and I'll miss it if we don't have them anymore.
Yep. Getting more questions about office and medical business, healthcare business. Do you see, we've seen a little bit of conversion of office space to medical and professional space. Do you see that continuing?
Well, yeah, I do. Again, I think the healthcare is one of the areas where I like the future. I think it's a wind in your back kind of a business. And so I view that strong. I view that as strong. I view the suburban, many of the major hospital systems, say in Houston, that are office in the TMC, the Texas Medical Center. There's almost 10,000 beds in the Texas Medical Center. It's the largest number of beds in America in one concentrated area. There is a push into the suburbs again to get closer to the customer, so to speak, the patient. So I think that'll continue. And leasing in traditional office buildings, yes, if you've got a core of what their demographic profile is looking for, and we're seeing some of that around the country. So I like the healthcare space. I think that's going to provide good returns. I think the hospital systems will emerge from this and be stronger. But I do think it's an acute situation today that they're going through. It's a pretty tough. They're going through a tough period right now.
And so we got a question from Joshua Greenblatt about the oil impact on the local Houston economy, but not so much from an operating expense standpoint, but more from a rental rate and occupancy standpoint. What do you see happening there?
So what's your sense of that question, Chip? More what's going to be office rents in Houston, or more?
No. Just I think multifamily rents. I think the beauty of multifamily, obviously, right, is the ability to mark to market.
Yes.
And so that really, rental rates really become a function of occupancy. And
yes. Yeah, I think again, I'll still look at multifamily as one of the resilient industries within commercial real estate. It'll be impacted severely near term, and again, particularly I think the B and C product. But if you're in West Houston, with that heavy oil and gas concentration, I think it's going to be a very difficult period. If you're, say, inside the loop, still difficult. There's probably a ceiling on the rents. There may be a little diminution of rental rate going forward. But again, my sense is we're not going to have a lot of new product delivered for a long time. And if you continue to have population in migration and job growth, which is what we've enjoyed throughout the South, those quote unquote smile states, I think that'll continue to happen. And over time, I think that the multifamily space will do well. It's just the thing that's hard to predict where we sit today is when does that occur? And part of that is driven by when do we all go back to work from the standpoint of truly engaging and not sheltering in place. And that'll happen. I mean, it'll happen. Again, I think the hard thing to do, I think people just need to take a deep breath. And I do think it's going to be very difficult. And I think we're in a brutal period of time. But I don't think you can make every decision about, I don't think there'll be a lot of acquisitions, for example, for the next 60 or 90 days. And things need to settle out. And how do you underwrite rents 3 months from now, 4 months from now? There has to be some clarity. We have to have visibility into how that plays out before we're really going to be able to be acquiring assets, or unless it's really a distressed asset where you feel like that's just at that price, it's going to make sense. But I do recall in 08 and 09, and part of it is because it was a V-shaped recovery and we popped out pretty quick, but the sellers didn't really cave in 08 and 09. They didn't panic. With few exceptions, there weren't massive discounts on projects to buy. So my sense is time will tell, and we'll just have to see. But I think it's a tough call to make now. So I do think people are going to sit on the sidelines for a while unless they've already committed to something.
Yeah, no, I think that's right on the money. With big institutional ownership of real estate, they are certainly positioned to hold on and weather storms.
Yeah.
So. Ryan Brown asked a question about your outlook for long-term demand for cold storage warehouse and Amazon, Walmart type distribution directly to consumers.
I don't have a firm enough opinion on that. I will say I don't consider myself an expert in the cold storage space. I will say what we're seeing from the whole Amazon, let me just address it generally, you may want to weigh in. We are seeing such a massive, the Amazon effect is not going away, right? In other words, and you could argue that this component we're going through right now, this virus, is going to accelerate that, not decelerate it. In other words, we're getting accustomed to having things dropped off at our front door whenever we want it. So that would portend to be a pretty tough result for the retailer that was the brick and mortar retailer. For the brick and mortar retailer that's competing with Amazon, so to speak, that's going to be a tough set of facts. The brick and mortar retailer that you and I become accustomed to frequenting because we want to walk in a store and buy something that way, I think will continue to do well. But I just don't have a strong enough opinion nor enough knowledge on the cold storage.
Well, here's one right up your alley. Virtual networking. Do you have any advice for
That is right up your networking. You answer that one. You're the virtual networking, man.
You know what? I think it's all about establishing as many touch points as you can with your clients and with your contacts, and same thing that you've always told people. Stay in touch internally. Make sure that you're maintaining your relationships internally, and then be active, whether it's on the phone or setting up. We had some of our asset services folks, setting up virtual happy hours. I think it's the same thing that everybody's doing that has that need to try to reach out, but more of that is better than less of that.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I think we're going to have more virtual networking than ever before. And I think we'll have more of this kind of interaction than ever before. But I don't think whereas right now this is the exclusive interaction we're having, I do not think people are going to tolerate that as the exclusive answer. In other words, we're two human beings, or we need that more personal connectivity. When we do see each other in person, they're going to be new norms. No question about it. And we'll do more of this, but I guess my point would be there'll be a balance, a new rhythm, if you will, to the way we interact with each other, and it won't be exclusively this way, nor will it be just like it used to be, so to speak.
Okay. Well, I think
Kim, are you up?
I am here. Larry and Chip, thank you so much for your time. We are always honored and appreciative to have you speak for us anytime. It was great as always. As a reminder to everyone on this webinar, you will receive a recording afterwards, along with the survey. If there's anybody you would like to be introduced to, just put it in the survey. And thank you all, both, all the attendees. We know that time's so valuable these days, and especially to our speakers for joining. Have a great day, stay safe, and we're all in this together.
Pleasure, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care.